What's going on, boxing fans? Julian Williams with The Distance. I'm here to talk about the history of the heavyweight division, Volume 4. I talked about John L. Sullivan. I talked about the history of boxing, and pretty much what I'm doing is I'm talking about the heavyweight division. The history from John L. Sullivan to now. So, I talked about Sullivan. I talked about the fight with Jim Corbett. Talked a little about Bob Fitzsimmons. And now I'm going to get to James J. Jeffries. James J. Jeffries. Before we had, a lot of athletes coming into the sport, which is something that the sport kind of lacks right now. Is athletes that are just coming into the sport. James Jeffries was your typical athlete. He was able to run fast. He was able to jump high, and from what I've read, he could have played baseball professionally. See, and that's something that boxing somewhat lacks now. Lacks, those athletes that are just getting into boxing. And I think that with James Jeffries at the time, being that he was athletic, I think he had an advantage over his opponents due to the fact of, because he knew how to use athleticism. And that's something that he brought to the heavyweight division was athleticism. And, he was a real athlete. It's like when you're an athlete, and you kind of have this athletic frame, then you can you can get into any sport and excel, possibly with a lot of practice and with a lot of training. See, back when I was about 220, 230 pounds, I was able to get into different sports because I had more of an athletic frame back then than I do now. I'm about 80, 90 pounds smaller, but I understand how it is, to be athletic and getting into a new sport, because when you're athletic, you can take the punishment, that a person that's not as athletic can take. So James Jeffries was a really good athlete, and he got into boxing. And some say that he was better than Joe Louis. Some say he's one of the best heavyweights of all time. But he won the championship. He defeated Bob Fitzsimmons, and I believe 1899 defeated Bob Fitzsimmons. Bob Fitzsimmons, pretty much the first person to move up from middleweight, become from the middleweight division to move up and become a heavyweight champion. When he defeated James Corbett, and he held on to the title for a while, and then James J. Jeffries defeated him in like 1899, knocked him out. So Jeffries held onto the title for a while. He didn't really have too many defenses. He, compared to now, he had about seven title defenses. And pretty much in his career, had 7 heavyweight title defenses. And then, he retired in like 1905. And 1905, and the people that he fought James Corbett, and he fought Bob Fitzsimmons again. He had another couple fights. A few other fighters who really aren't, big opponents, really. I think there was one, but I can't think of the name right now. But then you have Marvin Hart. Marvin Hart won a championship in 1905 against Jack Root, knocked him out in the 12th round. And coincidentally, James Jeffries was the referee for that bout. So Marvin Hart held onto the title very shortly. He had like one exhibition, and after that exhibition, he fought again against a fighter by the name of Tommy Burns. Tommy Burns is significant to the heavyweight division because he didn't conform to the color line. I believe he was the first Canadian heavyweight champion, probably one of the smallest heavyweight champions. He was about 5'7". And when I'm talking about small heavyweight champions, I'm referring to height. He was known to be about 5'7", but he was very stocky, and pretty much backed it up with with hard punches. And he was significant to he was very significant to boxing, because all these boxers, there was a color line. Black fighters, weren't fighting and contending for the heavyweight championship. And Tommy Burns, faced Jack Johnson, but before Jack Johnson, he put the title on the line against, whoever deserved a shot at that title. And Tommy Burns, pretty much was giving fighters an opportunity. Though he didn't hold the belt for long, I think he held the belt for about 2 years. But in those 2 years, he did things that were significant, culturally significant to boxing. He gave a Jewish fighter Joseph Smith, I believe his name was, gave Joseph Smith a heavyweight title shot. He was the first Jewish fighter to get a heavyweight title shot against Tommy Burns. And then, of course, he fought Jag Johnson in Sydney, Australia in like 1908. And I think this was dubbed the fight of the century. But it's been documented that Tommy Burns didn't want to fight Jag Johnson, but a promoter gave him like $30,000, and he decided to fight Jag Johnson. And anyway, this is a good stopping point because I'm gonna get to this fight of the century the next time. And I will be back Wednesday with Jag Johnson, because you can't just talk about Jag Johnson in a total of 4 or 5 minutes. There's quite a bit that you could sum up with Jag Johnson. And I think, being that Jag Johnson was the first black heavyweight champion, it's very significant to boxing. So I'm going to end right here. 1908, Jag Johnson won the heavyweight crown. So I'm going to feed Tommy Burns, who I believe was the first Canadian heavyweight champion. But I'm gonna pick up where I left off on Wednesday. Jag Johnson, heavyweight champion, 1908. I'm probably gonna have a whole video on Jag Johnson, and then move on from there. But anyway, that was The Distance. Thanks for watching History of the Heavyweight Division Volume 4. Peace.